Hello and welcome to another episode of the Simon and Friends podcast. I'm Simon Short. Joining me this week is Peyton Davila of Two Peas on a Pod. Peyton, welcome back in, man. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I think on the closing notes of last episode, I said not really liking this draft. I have an update. I kind of like this draft. No, it's the further we get into this, the further you start to find a little bit more that you like in prospects. And while I don't think this is a premium draft, I still think it's a good draft.
There's always something to like, right? It's not that there are 500 bad football players all trying to make it to the NFL right now.
Right.
It's maybe the difference in how many superstars are there going to be, how many Pro Bowlers are there going to be, how many All Pros. Doesn't mean teams can't get good players. And the fun part is for fans know if they need a third outside linebacker, a third, a fourth corner because their depth just got decimated through the year. Fans know if they, have good two, starting receivers in name, but neither guy really plays the slot well, and they need somebody to. So you're gonna find those little things here. So fans, when they're just thinking about their team, will find plenty that they like here. It's when on the national stage, on the big stage, just like how many of these guys are gonna be all pros? Maybe one. Like it's not quite as enticing. But we're here to preview all of that for you because our awards this month. If you're here for the first time, this is the first time you're seeing me and Peyton's face. Peyton comes on this show once a month to hand out awards for whatever the heck we want to talk about related to the NFL, or sometimes at least adjacent related to the NFL. If you're on YouTube, thank you for being here. Like, subscribe, comment. If you like YouTube and you like NFL, also check out Box Score Network YouTube, where we have NFL draft content coming to you almost every single day. It feels like at this point, between now and the NFL draft, two, three, four times a week, maybe, you will get stuff on the NFL draft on the Box Score Network YouTube channel. So make sure you're checking that out. If you're here, audio A1 Day One, we appreciate you as always. But if you're on YouTube, thank you all so much. Leave a comment. Let us know if you're ready for the draft, because what we're here to talk about today, all of our awards are themed around previewing the NFL Combine. And for our first off-season award show of 2026, we're highlighting not only things at the combine, like, ooh, like 40-yard dash time, yada, yada, stuff like all that's nice. But more importantly, the off-season rumors and scuttlebutt that take place at the combine, because each year, agents, scouts, coaches, and executives from all over the league meet in Indianapolis to do those medical tests and those on-field drills and whatnot. But for the most part, they're there to shake hands and tell rumors and giggle like schoolgirls at the bar at 2 a.m. about which player is going to get franchise tagged and who's actually going to be sneaky on the move on draft night and who is trying to aggressively move up in draft, stuff like that. So Peyton and I are going to hand out our six awards for newsy items slash rumors we are interested in hearing coming out of Combine Weekend, which takes place in just a few days. But before that, Peyton, I'm going to do what I do to Ben to you now. So this is how you know you're ingratiated fully into the podcast, because I have a segment, I have a conversation I want to have before we get to the actual podcast. And it's because there's one award I debated handing out tonight, and it's something that I've been asking guests for the last few shows, but it became a popular conversation on Twitter just yesterday. And it's the idea of the Raiders trading the first overall pick. Now, I brought this up a while ago, initially when Dante Moore elected to go back to Oregon, because that's when the draft became a true one quarterback draft, and that ransom price on the first overall pick can go way, way, way up. So I figured teams like the Jets and Browns with multiple firsts, even the Rams, could put together a big package for the rate to the Raiders for Mendoza. And while I think everyone likes Fernando Mendoza out of Indiana, I don't think anyone thinks he's going to be a top five, top eight quarterback in the league necessarily. So before I open it up to you, I wanted to give you some of the historical context that I was really mulling over. Going back 20 years, there have only been three instances where a team has traded the first quarterback pick in the draft. 2016 when the Rams traded for Goff, 2017 when the 49ers and Bears swapped picks so the Bears could take Trubisky at 2, and then in 2023 obviously when the Panthers traded up for Bryce Young. That context alone tells me it's supremely unlikely that the Raiders trade this pick three times in 20 years. Like it just does not seem like it's going to happen. Not only that, but two of those three teams had that traded the pick away, Tennessee in 2016 and Chicago in 2023, had young rookie contract first round pick quarterbacks on the roster that were still the starting quarterback for the following year. The Raiders obviously don't have that. And then for the 49ers, when they swapped those picks in 2017, they didn't have their franchise quarterback, but neither side was really like in a great place. And San Francisco wasn't really in position to take quarterback, kind of similar to the Raiders, to be honest. But it's not that it really worked out for them either. I mean, they took Solomon Thomas at three. They got a pick that became Dante Pettis. They got a pick that became Reuben Foster. Eventually in 2018, one of the picks they got was Fred Warner, so that's nice. But that's such a like long line from trading the second overall pick that it almost doesn't matter. Now, obviously, Chicago trading the pick away in 2023 was best case scenario because they got the first overall pick in the very next draft in a much better quarterback class, along with the rest of their return, including a starting right tackle, corner, receiver, another potential starting receiver who you really like in Luther Burden. But couldn't that happen for the Raiders now? Arch Manning, Dante Moore, Lenore Sellers, Julius Sand, and so many more could be in next year's class. If Vegas can get the Jets or Browns pick next year, who could both be very bad teams next year, and they have a chance at that number one overall pick again, should they just take it in what could be a better quarterback class in 2027, plus whatever they could get this year? Even the middle of the road outcome of those three was Tennessee in 2016, because their return for Goff included Jack Conklin, Derrick Henry, Corey Davis, and Jonnu Smith, players that define that mini era of Titans football, which was quarterbacked by just a league average quarterback for those few years in Ryan Tannehill. So you can there's not a lot of history that suggests this is a good idea, but in the few cases there have been, it wasn't a horrible situation for any of the teams. So what do you think? Should the Raiders seriously consider calling the Jets, calling the Browns, calling the Rams, these teams with multiple first round picks, and say, come get them, the trade's available?
I think that there's not to get too like Marvel coded because I know that you tend to have a affinity for going into Marvel rabbit holes, which is fine. But this is kind of the Doctor Strange. There's only one scenario in which this makes
Mm-hmm.
sense to do,
Mm-hmm.
and it's if, which not to like step on the toes of our discussion that we're gonna have, but if they were to trade with, let's just say, the Jets, theoretically, because the Jets do have like the war chest of the picks from the trades they've made, um, they trade with the Jets, they get a pretty good haul for it, and then they turn around and they acquire Kyler Murray.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way because then it's kind of a similar archetype as just because it is the example you used, like it is kind of a pseudo Titans build as far as
Mm-hmm.
roster goes because you have Ginty, who's like the highly touted prospect running back who, ends up becoming one of the best running backs in the league, which we think he can be still. But then you also have the ability to go and use those picks to draft a true wide receiver one, draft
Mm-hmm.
a either offensive lineman that's a anchor for your, offensive line. Um, I mean, this Raiders roster is in a very different place than probably that Titans roster was, but just for the sake of like theorizing what this would look like. This is like the one scenario where it makes sense, and it's if it's not that, then as much as yes, the 2027 class, we have a lot of high hopes for it. I don't know that I have a ton of faith that the pieces that are worth building around from from 2 years ago moving into that class is like at that point, while yes, you're gonna have all those picks, you're pretty much going to be pigeonholed into like, okay, whatever quarterback we take in the 27 class, like if it has to work. Otherwise, there's not really a way out of it because at that point you're re-signing the guys from the first class that the first two classes that kind of paid dividends,
Right.
and therefore you're out of cap space or like most of your caps allocated. So the real question is, do you take the quarterback now with the pick and forego the additional draft assets and fill in the holes elsewhere and kind of figure it out as you go, right? Or do you pot commit to that 27 class and that is your quarterback? Or do and in the case where it's like, okay, those are the two realistic, or not too realistic, but the two probably most likely outcomes if you're saying like obviously the most likely outcome is the they're taking Mendoza, no, duh. But the two outcomes in which they trade is like you get Kyler, you have his contract. I think it's like what goes down to like 15. I have this in my notes because we're going to talk about it, but I think it goes down to like 15 million if they trade him. The cap hit, and then I guess I'm trying to think of like how pick compensation wise, I don't really think it's going to cost that much. If anything, it's like you might even get a pick back, depending. So, um, I think that there is ideology to because of this roster being pretty. I mean, let's just face it. Like this is
It's
probably
bad. It's a bad roster.
like the worst overall roster in the league. Like the Jets are bad, but the roster at
They
least had.
they do have the number one overall pick, so it would
Yeah, it
give
would make
credence to that
sense.
theory.
But I yeah, I think that is it worth them trading the number one pick? I think there's an actual solid argument that it might be worth exploring, but they will never do it.
It's so hard when there is and Mendoza specifically makes it so difficult that if it was a one quarterback draft, but it was a slam dunk, there wouldn't be a question, right? And even take last year, the difference in stylistically and prototype, the type of quarterback Cam Ward is versus
Yeah,
Mendoza, because the Titans were not trading Cam Ward, even though they were getting offers from Cleveland, from New York. They probably could
yeah,
have run the table on those teams. But Cam Ward, I don't think if you like stacked up what, I say it all the time, the Madden rating for Ward and Mendoza going into year one of their NFL careers wouldn't be drastically different. But the
no,
fact that Ward plays a style of football that is more akin to the elite quarterbacks than Mendoza does, the Titans were not interested in trading that pick. And I don't actually think the Raiders are either. I think the Raiders are very much, and I think the smart answer is probably like, can this guy be at minimum a league average quarterback that we can build around and have here in the building when we haven't had that since Carr left and even since, the good version of Carr left? Yeah, we should just take that because that rights so many wrongs with the rest of your team. But I don't know, man. The more I look at it, the more I'm just like, but it it all in a vacuum sounds enticing. Now here's the tough part. They'd kind of be in the worst of all the worlds of the circumstances that I presented you, right? Because like which team has the most they could trade? It's the Jets.
yeah,
Well, the Jets are at two. So
right,
if the Jets are like, hey, you're just coming back to two, I'm not trading you my first next year, or I'm not trading you 16, right? Maybe you get one of those, but whatever first you get, you're not getting our first next year.
right.
You're getting the Colts' first. You're
Colts.
getting the Cowboys first, whatever it is, or worst of Cowboys, Packers, whatever that pick ended up being.
Yeah,
When at one point I remember maybe it was December, and somehow the Jets were slated to have like the seventh pick. And if you were the team and you went from one to seven, and you also got 16, and you also got one of the first next year, then it's like, oh boy, right? But for the Jets, if you're like, okay, I moved down to, but then that's where you get to Cleveland. Okay, but Cleveland, they only have one pick next year. So
right,
how motivated are they going to be to move that pick? Are you going to get six and the Browns' first round pick next year? Maybe, right? So this is why I think you at least have to hear the offers because if you're like, I could bet against the Browns, right? The
right.
Browns where all their offensive linemen are free agents.
Hmm.
Todd Monken is their head coach now. Jim Schwartz is out of the building. Yeah, that team's going to have the first overall pick. And if I get six in that and I can take, I don't know, Ruben Bain and
Sure.
a pick at quarterback next year. And the Kyler thing is interesting because they could do that, but I would almost say like double down. Like don't go back. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. Like just let Geno start for another year or like I don't know who's some young
I
day
mean,
three
Kenny
guy they
Pickett's
have.
there, but sure.
Oh God, don't
Yeah,
do that. But like like really ham it up, man. Try to get two top five picks next year. I don't know if
yeah.
Brady has the appetite for that sort of thing. Um, so how much would you really get from the Jets if you really opened it up to all the other teams? How much could you really run up the price? I think that's something you really do have to consider. Um, because I look at the 49ers. when they traded the Trubisky pick, it's funny because they still could have just taken like Mahomes and been fine. Because their starting quarterback going into 2017 was Brian Hoyer. They signed Brian Hoyer, and they were like on like essentially bridge quarterback situation. And then they traded for Jimmy Garoppolo at the beginning of October. Super weird situation, by the way. What is Kyle Shanahan up to? Um, but they didn't have a plan at quarterback, and yet they still moved on from the pick. And then the very next year, they had another top 10 pick, and they took Mike McGlinchey. So if you do the thing where you make this trade and you don't flip another pick for Kyler, because I'm with you, it wouldn't take much, and
No.
you could cut him after a year very easily. Um, but if you don't even add him and you just do whatever at quarterback, and you are bad for another season, and you have a top 10 pick in a draft that might have four, five, six quarterbacks that could go top 10. Okay, now you don't even need the first overall pick, right? Now if you have the eighth, though, pick eight next year might have more value than pick two this year based on the number of quarterbacks that might be available. Um, I think you'd have to get a haul. You'd have to get one of the teams you're trading with. You'd have to get their first next year, plus whatever pick you're moving down to. And then I would really want something additionally. So like the idea would be the Jets and Browns have two first round picks this year. I want both of those, and I want your first next year to make it happen. Both teams probably say no to that, in which case that then doesn't happen. But I wanted to bring it up because the context of those only three times that it's happened, and where those teams were at, I think there's too much working against the scenario for it to actually come to fruition.
Yeah. Which is, I would love to have like the discussion of it, but like even more so than I honestly think that even more so than last year because of the teams that theoretically could trade up, like just the offer because of their positioning at the top of this draft. Like unless the Raiders are going to do a thing where they then trade down again, but like then again
Hmm.
what's the value, like you said, what's the value of the second pick in this draft?
Hmm.
And like what can you realistically get in future assets for that? And
Right.
even if it is, a pick this year and then like a pick next year. I like when I say a pick, I mean first, of course. But I find that hard to believe that they would be able to execute that, and that's kind of where the argument kind of fails to come to any kind of real fruition.
Yeah. Because at that point, if you do the Jets, and let's say you only get two, and then let's say you get next year's first,
Sure.
but then you're like you get Arvell Reese
Hmm.
and or Caleb Down, and you're hoping that one of the quarterbacks works out,
Right.
and Manning and Sellers don't go back for another year, and Moore is actually who we hope he is, and all
Yeah.
that. You'd have to get someone to completely overpay, I think, to really
Yes.
really do it. And Ronan, I think, had the best argument against it, and not even against it, but just like the biggest factor is if the Raiders were really torn 50-50 on Moore or Mendoza before Moore opted to go back to Oregon, you do it. But if
Yeah.
they were steadfast in Mendoza is the dude no matter what, and Moore doesn't really play into it whether or not they do, then you probably are best to stick and pick.
Yeah.
All right, it's time to get into our awards, and we've alluded to this one, so I'm just going to throw the graphic right up. You go right into it. Uh, this is my favorite graphic I've ever made. The Confused Mr. Krabs meme award. Hand this out. Why are Kyler and Tua here?
Well, first off, my awards are going to be named. There was a whole thing earlier, like kind of like around the time where we last recorded our episode, where like 2016 was kind of having like 2026 to do 2016 was a whole thing on the internet, which I honestly didn't really fully understand. I didn't get it, but my wife explained it to me. Still didn't get it, but I felt like it was a good opportunity for me to use it and kind of revisit some iconic memes that were created then. And Confused Mr. Krabs is one of those. And I think it's just more of the reason why I chose Confused Mr. Krabs is because both of these teams are just in terrible situations that they feel very much like Confused Mr. Krabs. What do we do with our quarterbacks so that we can move on? But the deeper you really look into it, it's like there's just not a lot that they can do. The options are very they're very limited. And I'll
Yep.
start with Kyler. Whenever we dive deep into it, as far as what the Cardinals are going to have to do in order to move on from him and be done with this Kyler Murray era, um, they could be forced to cut him outright, which would incur 50 million plus in dead cap if they were to do it like right now. If they find a trade partner, it could, I think it could go down to like 15 million, which I think I alluded to in our previous conversation about the Raiders. And really, like in a trade, they're probably going to have to. I don't even know if you can get an asset back, depending on like what the team is. It's really going to be hard for them to do that. But then you start to look at like the options, and the Raiders getting number one, honestly, for both of these situations, for Kyler and two, we'll get to two in a minute too. But the Raiders getting the number one pick was like terrible for both of these teams' outcomes. Like that seemed primed for like, okay, that one of these quarterbacks can probably end up there as like a
Hmm.
bridge, but then they end up with they end up getting number one. It's like, well, there's a guy, there's one guy in this draft, and they're probably gonna take him. Um, and then you run into the situation where it's like, well, the other problem is that each of these teams kind of needs like each other, like in a way, which that won't
Hmm.
happen. Like I would
Right.
be, that would be flabbergasting if like they did a swap ski of Tua and Kyler, which I mean that would be funny for content. That would be incredible because it would just be like, all right, so you just did like the real, like you did the football version of wife swap, which is crazy to think that you would do that. But anyways, but then outside of that, there's like two realistically for Kyler at least, and if the thing is for Tua, it's like in my opinion, it's even bleaker for Tua,
Oh yeah.
um, because the thing is that one of the teams that Kyler makes sense for is in the same division as the Dolphins, so the
Hmm.
Dolphins are going to do that. um,
Right.
for Kyler, it's like I look at the Jets and I don't really like if Dante Moore doesn't declare, we're not having this discussion at all,
Right. Hmm.
but they just don't like there's no plan at quarterback right now for them. Unless they like really fall in love with Ty Simpson or whatever or whoever QB2 is and decide to take him maybe at like in the top of the second or maybe even reach and take him like in that middle of the first at what pick 16, right?
Hmm.
Um that's the only instance where I can see like but other than that, they still have a vacancy. Like Aaron Glenn clearly kind of needs to win right now, kind of.
Yep.
and
Hmm.
I
You could say
don't
that.
and I don't know that like I wonder if Aaron Glenn is going to push to get like a vet in
Hmm.
like a Kyler
Hmm.
so that he can at least show like hey, like I can win if you give me a professional to play this position, but I can't do it with like a guy who just has tools that you're just, where you're just kind of throwing Aaron Glenn to the wolves a little bit.
Right.
With a with whoever QB2 is in this draft, for instance. That being said, like there's not, I don't know exactly what you would because I mean they have cap space, so I guess that's not the issue. But like I don't know what the like trade looks like in that case for that, but we don't need to really go through those details. The other team it just happens to be the Steelers, but but the thing is, I think with the with the McCarthy hiring, it's like this does Aaron Rodgers come back because of that, because of familiarity? People are leaning towards yes, he probably will. So then at that point, like doesn't make any sense. So it's like there's one team that works for Kyler, and it makes sense in theory because both parties would benefit from it. It's one of the few places where both parties would benefit up from it, and they could probably do it without having a ton of like bad repercussions from it, right? Um, Tua, on the other hand, I
Rough.
I mean, okay, first off, that I did find this because I was like, is there even like any mock trades out there for Kyler and Tua? And apparently, yes, the financials like would work and it would like perfectly work. And the trade, somebody came up with the trade of Kyler and pick 182 in this draft for Tua and pick 111 is like the value proposition, I guess,
Hmm.
based on whether the contracts work. So it's basically like they swap quarterbacks and the Cardinals get like an earlier pick
Hmm.
by like whatever that is, a round.
Or yeah, 2 round.
So round and a half, two.
Yeah.
So, which is not terrible. Like I think
Hmm.
that's fine. But the problem, then again, lies the problem is like why who okay, this is a perfect example of like those trades where it's like who's hanging up the phone quicker, or like who says no first,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Just as a thought exercise, do you think the Cardinals say no first or the Dolphins say no first?
I think I actually think the Dolphins might. Now, I've galaxy brained these things before, but it's just when Ronan and I did QB predictions just a couple weeks ago, I like the Tua to Arizona fit because I think Mike LaFleur is a good coach for that. And I don't think Kyler is going to be a fit for the way Halfley is going to want to play.
I would agree with that.
So I think it would come down to styles. Because
Yeah,
for as bad as the Tua situation is, his talent, where his talent is at, and where his contract is at, Cardinals got nothing going on for them. And Tua only has, after this year, one more year where you're incurring a large dead cap hit. But even if you incur that dead cap hit, you still get cap savings by moving on from him. I'm not this person that's precious about how big a dead cap is. Do you save money or not? If you save
yeah,
money, then you can use
do
it.
it.
So just
Right.
we just saw the Broncos make the AFC Championship game with Russell Wilson still being their highest paid player. So yeah, so ironically, because Kyler is a better player and he's cheaper for less time, but I think Tua is a better fit in Arizona than Kyler is in Miami.
I think I would agree with that sentiment. If that trade were to happen, I will say one note: like post June 1st, the cap on Tua does go down to like 13 million, which I didn't know that. I wasn't sure how that factored as far as contract goes. So really, if he gets traded past June 1st, like that does help whatever team
Hmm.
takes on to his contract.
Hmm.
The two kind of like destinations that one of them kind of does intrigue me quite a bit. The other one doesn't make any sense at all because I don't think that either team like I don't really think they would do it. Um, the Saints were one that were proposed because like I guess they have Shuck, but like if you want
Hmm.
stability based on like injury history and stuff, you could
Hmm.
get Tua as a backup
Hmm.
because you're not really paying a lot. That one like didn't make a ton of sense to me because I feel like by bringing Tua in, you are kind of creating a little bit of a questionability of like how much do you believe in Shuck as your
Right.
future based on
Hmm.
like him being pretty promising towards the
Hmm.
end of the season last year.
Hmm.
Um, but the other one that came up, this one I want your opinion on. How do you feel about the Colts trading for him if that were to be the
Mm.
case? And the trade that I saw that like kind of made the most sense was basically like Tua and some kind of like draft pick just for Anthony Richardson, where it's like,
Oh, I love that. You know, I love that.
which I think that like for the Colts, it kind of makes sense. The
Hmm.
problem is then is if it's happening after June 1st, I guess, do you still have enough money to like franchise Daniel Jones or
Right.
something of that sort
Right.
and have some kind of like we want to remain competitive. We want a quarterback who's going to fill this void while Daniel Jones is recovering. But then once Daniel Jones comes back, he's our guy.
Hmm. At that point, if that's the math that's in mind, we're just trying to buy time. I don't like it then because Tua is not again stylistic fit. Like he's just not
Right.
going to do the mobility piece.
Yep.
He's not gonna. He's like think about the quarterbacks that Steichen has succeeded with. Herbert,
Yeah.
even Hurts, Daniel Jones, even when they drafted Anthony Richardson, big,
Yes.
strong, tough, fast.
Yeah.
And like Tua's
Two is
Tua's
not
none of
that. He's
those
the
things.
exact
Maybe
opposite. Right.
maybe tough. Maybe we'll give him tough just because he is an NFL player, but like he's none of those things. So
Yeah.
like conceptually just the idea of like you get a stopgap who's proven to put together good offenses, but I don't think he's a fit for Steichen.
I don't either.
Um
I guess my
the
point is
Saints
that
thing would
like,
make sense if he was cut and they just signed him to one of those the
oh
Russell
yeah,
Wilson
yeah,
trick of like we can pay you the minimum because you're
yeah.
getting paid by Miami still that and then there's not the pressure of we're actually bringing him in here in case Shuck messes up because he's just a minimum contract guy. But Yeah, trading for him, I'm with you. That doesn't make sense.
So all that to say, but the whole point of us going through like these mock trades is just like it is increasingly hard to find a way to get these players off your team. So
Yep.
then you're left with the question of like the confused Mr. Krabs feeling of like we went through all this trouble. Do we just freaking keep these guys and just like they just play on our team next year and whatever, or do we just you know have to sacrifice our money in order to get these guys off our team? That's ultimately that's what it boils down to. I don't think either of these guys are going to get traded. Ultimately, I think it's
Mm.
literally just going to be they're on our team. They either are playing or aren't playing, or we are going to cut them and we're just going to eat it.
What
Like
is
I don't really see any in
That's super
between.
depressing. I hate that.
It is.
Um,
I think that we're gonna the point of like the connection to the meme is like I think we're gonna do this whole song and dance at the combine and like it's gonna be talked about like these are the two quarterbacks that people think are going to get
mhm.
traded and then ultimately like we're gonna do all this theorizing yada yada. These guys I don't think are going anywhere, and if they are going anywhere, it's because they got cut outright and they just go sign somewhere as free agents.
So I'm on over the cap real quick, trying to play around with what the Dolphins can do, because it's funny the Cardinals, it's just more stale than anything. Like, is Kyler really going to be on his third coaching staff when it's just been as meek as it's been for the last 4 years?
Right.
And like, but like you could, right? You could. And what would their dead cap hit be right now if they moved on from him right
I
now?
think it
Like
was
if they
like
just straight up cut him?
50. It's like 50 and some change, I think.
But they already have cap space, so like. And the thing is with the Cardinals, they're not in win now mode, right?
No,
It
no,
well,
not at all.
and even if they did a post June one, it wouldn't really help them all that much. But they would
And
save 5 million. So they could just, I would say with Kyler, worst case, Cardinals just cut him. The Dolphins can't do that,
yeah,
right? The Dolphins, like, Tua can't be on the team. He got
correct.
benched for Quinn Ewers. Hang on, wait. I was saying they can't cut him.
Yes.
Um, just outright. I guess like you said, they could probably post June one the cut, right? Just to get cap space.
Yeah.
But like they need to continue to create some cap space because the on over the cap, the Tyreek Hill release is already through, but Chubb is not through yet. Um, when they do Chubb and once they move on from Minka in one way or another, they'll get to like 12, 13 million cap space. Um, but like they're still gonna need more money just to do something. But yeah, post June one cut, they're like they're hurting themselves, so they can't just
Yeah.
they're not gonna be able to just cut Tua. So do they just keep Tua? I don't see how they can. What I was valuing them at for trades, but your point isn't even the compensation. It's we're running out of teams.
Yeah,
We're running out of teams for them to go,
it's like
and that's
where
100% true.
yeah, there's no chairs left in the musical chairs and like where and if there are, it's like it's kind of like they're being reserved. They have like the little reserved paper thing, like you know how you go to like a wedding or like whatever, and it's like they just kind of have a reserved little triangle piece of paper for now. And it's like at any point in time, the wind could just take it away, and like all of a sudden it becomes open. But for now,
Yeah.
they're not letting anybody else sit there until they figure it out.
Can I give you a fun one for Kyler?
Sure.
What week do we think Patrick Mahomes is gonna be fully healthy?
I thought about that I thought about the Chiefs for
Kyler gets 4 weeks to just play under Andy Reid and completely rebuild his stock around the league. They imagine
I
this.
guess,
Imagine they
yeah.
trade a like sixth round. I mean, I put him at a fourth round pick, but let's
Yeah.
say they trade a sixth round pick for him, and they like split the money or whatever they do,
Sure.
and he balls out for 4 weeks. Trade deadline, they trade him for like a third, and all they did was they got a competent quarterback play for 4 weeks while Mahomes got to continue to rest, and they move up 3 rounds in the 2027 draft
Huh.
because like
I don't hate
some
it.
other team had a horrible. I mean, who's going to have a horrible situation with their quarterback by midway through the season?
Probably, I mean, probably one of these two teams. No,
Panthers, Falcons, one
aside
of
from
these
them.
two teams again. He goes back
Um,
to the Cardinals.
yeah.
Cardinals like, dang, that guy's
I
pretty good.
guess, I guess I would say If
Vikings,
I'm being, yeah, I would say Vikings. I mean, I don't want to
depending
get
on what
too
happens there.
like
Yeah, we don't need
negative.
to do the whole again quarterback
Yeah,
prediction thing
I
here,
mean,
but
maybe like I don't know. Maybe if Baker doesn't really improve from like what happened last year, I wonder
if
if
things
maybe
just
that
kind of
gets a
turn
little
around, and go bad.
stale.
All right,
Yeah, Falcons, another one. Like
Penix just doesn't
if
get healthy
yeah,
or comes back,
yeah,
doesn't play well.
there are situations where like if they open up sometime, like there's opportunity.
But
I
yeah,
I
there's
did
not
kind of
enough landing spots right now because when Ronan
yeah
and I did the exercise, we came up with like five true quarterback changes for week one that weren't like because of injury or something, and that is far below the yearly average in terms of week one new true starting quarterback. So it's definitely a weird year.
yeah for sure. I mean I wonder if last thing about this, I wonder if and obviously it's not the same kind of thing. Like would Kyler kind of do the a Kurt Warner like '04 Giants thing where they draft, like they draft Eli obviously super high and at number one, and he's definitely the future of the franchise. But they bring in Kyler to just kind of be like, which I mean, in today's NFL, that's kind of unheard of. But Kyler was like, oh, young, like up
Hmm.
and coming, like guy who we thought was gonna be like a top five quarterback for
Hmm.
a while. Obviously,
Hmm.
Kurt Warner, much more success early on in his
Hmm.
career,
Hmm.
very different career path, but and just kind of have him on the team for a year, and then after the year's over, right, like Kyler, go ahead and do what you will and try and go
Hmm.
be another reclamation project somewhere else. We just wanted you here for the sake
Yeah,
of kind of like bridging the gap
not
with
having to play the rookie. Hmm.
yeah. I mean, I doubt that happens, but
I
I've
mean,
seen crazier things.
he's in that kind of phase of his career at this point, and
Yeah,
the funny thing is connecting the Raiders even more.
yeah,
Kubiak just had Darnold reclamation project,
right.
so Anyways, there's a number of ways that could go. It's certainly gonna be weird. Certainly gonna be interesting to see what people are saying out of the combine. You hinted at my first award a couple times, so let's go ahead and hit this one. Uh, my graphics are so much less fun. Your meme inspired ones are great. Um, I just came, as you know, I just came back from Disney. Went to
Yeah,
Disney for my daughter's first time there. So all of mine are named after Disney rides. So this is the Rise of the Resistance Award. Who's going to rise to the cream of the crop to be quarterback two out of the combine? Who's going to enter the combine weekend as if it's the Ride to the Resistance experience and come out of it as a new rebellion leader slash the second quarterback in the draft? And it's once again, it's not a strong quarterback draft. And obviously, we just talked about Mendoza, and he's going number one to somebody, probably the Raiders. But who is quarterback two? So, like Shadur Sanders from last year, Alabama's Ty Simpson was viewed as that guy for a lot of the 2025 college football season. He kind of came out of nowhere, but once the season happened, it was like, oh, Ty Simpson going to be QB2, especially because of the decline of LSU's quarterback Garrett Nussmeier over the last 9 to 12 months. But with Simpson's struggles in the back half of 2025 and Nussmeier's strong Senior Bowl showing, there are bound to be questions about who the second quarterback drafted will be in April as we get to the combine. So with teams like the Jets, Browns, and Rams having multiple picks in the first round, I do think it's likely we see a second quarterback go in the first. The question is, who will it be and where will they play? So, Peyton, currently, who do you have as quarterback two in the NFL draft? And when do you think that person comes off the board?
I have Ty Simpson as QB2. Um, it's a little closer than I think most people's are. I had a lot of love for Nussmeier coming into the season. Like
Mm,
very early on, I was like possible number one overall pick. Like
hmm. Hmm.
I felt very good about Nussmeier, and then we saw his play kind of degenerate over the season, and here we are. He's being debated with Ty Simpson as QB2, and I think it's just that as much as at Bama in general, team success was like the team's overall success was not as high as people had expected. I thought Simpson developed pretty quickly for being a guy that hasn't played a lot of football.
Hmm.
And I think that seeing the quick development and the tools that he has, I think there's room for him to develop pretty quickly, if he's put into the right situation. Granted, is that is QB2 in this draft going to go in the first round? I think is kind of like a big talking point. I think the majority of
Hmm.
people would say yes, probably
Hmm.
akin to like similar range that Jackson Dart went last year.
Right.
Um, and I think that that's probably like, granted this is a different draft, but that's probably about where I would say he's going to go. Like, even if, you know, which this happens with quarterbacks all the time where it's like on your big board, they're probably significantly lower, but because of the positional value, they're always going to get drafted higher.
Hmm.
Um, so yes, a long-winded answer. Ty Simpson is my QB2, and I think that if I had to say where is he going to get drafted, probably going to be like late first round.
Yeah, I still have Ty Simpson as well. I went back and I watched both of them again, um, both from later in the season because Nussmeier was obviously dealing with the injury, but I was never a Nussmeier guy. Like I remember last year in the winter when Dame Brugler came out all out of nowhere with Nussmeier as his like number one guy. Like this guy could be the number one pick in last year's draft in the Cam Ward draft. And I watched him and I was like, I don't get it. I don't know, man. I don't. And I when I watched watched that game, watched several games from last year over the summer, watched maybe the Clemson game from this year, and then obviously there an injury takes place, right? The hip or core muscle, whatever it was. And later in the year, he was managing it better, and it felt a little better, but it's still clearly bothering him. But I watched the South Carolina game, which was a good game by him, and good late moments of the game and whatnot. But the match of just athletic ability and mentality of play, when there's that big of a gap, like you're playing in a way that you're writing checks your body can't cash kind of deal. I'm I know it's fun to like root for the gunslinger type, but when I'm like gonna put my NFL franchise in that person's hands, I don't love it. And the thing that actually concerns me about the play is finicky in the pocket and doesn't have good timing with windows opening against defenses. So like even in the good games where there's good yardage and touchdowns and he's moving okay, he immediately drifts in the pocket and like the timing of when routes kind of come open is just always off, and the accuracy is just like the guys are falling down for the ball a lot, guys are reaching behind a lot, and Ty Simpson has the same issues with not the best athlete, but just plays within himself, gets the ball out quickly, accurately. I think there's more zip on the ball when he's throwing it. I just like the traits better, and if Nussmeier had more questions but had far superior traits, then the difference in games played would also come into factor because Nussmeier has about 25 or so starts to Simpson's like 15, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they're too similar in their like true traits and abilities for a number of that. Now, if it was 40 starts in college versus 15, that's a huge difference. 25 to 15, not a big deal to me. So I'm still in the Simpson range. And like you, I think one of those teams at the end of the first round, whether it's the Browns with their second pick, if the Jets fall in love and it's that pick at 16, or it's one of those teams with their first pick in the second round in that range, and then they kind of use it to move up a little bit, a la Jackson Dart last year, like you said. I think I'd go with Simpson.
Yeah, and I'm pretty steadfast on that. I don't know that that's going to change a whole lot in the
Yeah.
process. Like relating to the combine, I don't know that we're going to see a lot from either of these guys. It's going to like pivot,
Hmm.
which would like the way I feel about either of them.
Because even because I'm sure one talking point for Nussmeier will be like how does he look physically, right?
Yeah.
Right, like when he's whatever athletic testing he chooses to do, probably won't do. But if he chooses to throw to try to show he's healthy and he can throw, for me, I didn't like him throwing the ball last year when he was healthy anyway. So like that's not going to do anything for me. I think for both of them, it's going to be about like the interviews and
Mhm.
what they're going to be able to say and show in terms of like why things didn't work and the medicals of Nussmeier and where his health is at and stuff. It's going to be the things we won't see on our end, but it'll definitely be the conversations coming out. All right, what's your second award?
I am gonna go with the Drake Hotline Bling meme award, which if you've never seen the Drake Hotline Bling music video, then you have no idea what I'm talking about. But you at
Don't
least
explain a
know,
meme. You're good. People
yeah,
get it.
whatever, you get it.
Out
Verbal
here
meme.
explaining
Anyways,
memes from 2016. Incredible.
so the Drake Hotline Bling meme award is gonna go to Keldrick Falk and Cassius Howell going into the combine, and kind of relating to what these guys sort of have at stake at the combine in a way. But also more so like the perception of both these guys, A, going into the combine, and B, like how, coming out of the combine, what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
Whenever it comes, the reason why I picked these two guys is because, one, I think figuring out who, well, I guess depending on whether you consider Arvell Reese an edge or linebacker or whatever, figuring out which after Reese, Bain, and Bailey, like who that next edge rusher is in this class is kind of like up for interpretation. I think the majority of people probably lean Falk, but I've seen how, like, depending on what you kind of look for in an edge rusher, like some people like Howell more, some people even like a guy like Mesidor better, but like obviously there's the age factor. But with these two guys in particular, um, the reason I use the Hotline Bling meme is because I think right now pre combine, right? I think a lot of people, if you're like myself, are going to, take the top meme format of Drake being like, no, I don't want that as Cassius Howell, even though he has better production, right? But you look
Hmm.
at the
Hmm.
traits and you look at the size and arm length, and it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to build my, have my, you know, primary edge rusher or even secondary edge rusher be that guy. But then the bottom half of the meme where Drake's going like, yeah, I want that, is Kendrick Falk, who is just like looks like a tank, like
Yep.
built like an ox, and um, but he's like just the pass rush plan is not there. Um, needs a lot of work in regards to like how he approaches pass rushing, and so like better hand usage, all this stuff to the point where it's like, I even if it's not there, that looks a lot more appealing to me than the other guy. I guess what I wanted to take that to where kind of what I'm hoping to see from these guys at the combine to kind of get our perceptions to be either flipped or like maybe we're into both these guys as a result. I'll start with Keldrick Falk because I think a lot of people are really excited about Keldrick Falk and have him at defaulted as edge three on mainly because of those like size traits, right? Um, right now edge four if you count ROVs. You get my point. Um, I mean, like I said, he's built like a freaking tank. He's 6'6", 285. But the thing is that like whenever you watch him, the tape isn't bad. It's just that when you watch the pass rush reps, it's like he doesn't look as impressive as I thought it would be.
Hmm.
Like it, I don't think he has like an insane amount of burst. I don't think he's like whenever you see him kind of like move laterally, it's not really. It kind of looks a little like draggy, and like
Yeah.
he's having a little trouble trying to move side to side. And then in relation to that, whenever he's trying to kind of like move laterally to go outside, like I don't really see a lot of bend.
Hmm. Hmm.
Which I
Hmm.
get it. This dude's huge, so like I'm
Right.
not expecting him to be able to bend like like Flubber or like Gumby and just be crazy. But you got to have at least some kind of flexibility, especially like hip
Hmm.
flexibility
Yeah.
at edge in order to like really win on pass rush reps. So like for me with Falk, like specifically. Which this is the case for this is really the only like combine specific, like if you're watching the combine on Twitter or like watching clips or whatever, catch or like trying to like track certain drills or whatever.
Hmm.
There are certain drills that are really important for like certain position groups, for especially for a guy like Falk because of the weaknesses. Like I'm watching the hoop and bend drill to see like, okay, is he gonna like did he work on his like hip flexibility, and like is he showing more bend in drills than he did on tape? His 4 cone and 3 cone, because I need to see like that lateral movement be at least halfway decent. all and remember, like because he's so big, like the size adjusted speed stuff is going to be really important. Like don't just
Yep.
look at the raw numbers. Like you got to take into
Yep.
context, like because of how big he is, like how is he moving relative to that. And then I think the broad jump, because of that like first step explosiveness, like
Hmm.
I think I need to see it be at least like pretty good, just to like make sure that he's not just gonna be a big body that's like
Hmm.
essentially like we kind of the worry that I think a lot of people have is like, we really liked Michael Williams last year. Michael Williams didn't really rush the passer very well. He was kind of stood there, you know. That's kind of where a lot of the worries are with Falk. But if he can at least perform halfway decent in those drills, I think that we'll continue to be really into Keldrick Falk as being a legitimate, like pass rushing prospect that you can actually build your pass rushing room around, as your number one, you edge rusher. But ultimately, it's like right now he looks really appealing, but he could look less appealing after the combine, depending on how this goes. With Howell, it's like quite the opposite, where it's like people are kind of really like doubting Howell is like translating to the next level because of how he wins with primarily speed, because
Hmm.
he's a speed demon, designated pass rusher, and that's pretty much all he does. That's it. And he like we've talked about how undersized he is. He has short arms, and doesn't really like have good hand usage. Which like if you have short arms and you're not like super big and you don't have good hand usage, like how are you going to win in the NFL?
Right.
And I think for him, it's like we need to see him do well in those drills with the hand usage and technique, and like seeing like kind of him show off his bag as a pass rusher,
Hmm.
so that it's like if you're gonna rely on something, like you better be really good technically. If you're only gonna do this one thing, you better do it
Hmm.
insanely well, or else it's not gonna work. And that's kind of where I think for Howell, it's like if the only way you're gonna kind of get that stink off you, that Drake's looking at you like I'm not taking you with a top 20 pick. You have to kind of show that you have more versatility in that
Hmm.
way, other than just being a one trick pony. And so I think that like Howell especially, I think has more at stake than Falk does. Like I think Falk will probably
Hmm.
get drafted higher than Howell regardless, but I think
Yeah.
it's more of like having faith that Falk will be a prospect that we think he can be. Whereas for Howell, it's like depending on how the combine goes, like you might be able to sneak in like to that like 15, 16
Hmm.
range, or you might like be late first, possibly falling out of it, depending on how it goes. So, yeah, and I think that like as I evaluated all the position groups, I wanted to focus on like some of these guys that were past kind of like the top 10 prospects of like
Hmm.
these names that you're going to hear that possibly could be like risers or fallers after this, and how to kind of track that as we head into the combine.
How are you going to feel when neither of them do any of the athletic testing?
Yeah, probably. I mean, they probably aren't going to, you knowing them. But like, I guess like my point is that I guess I just wanted to use this as a thought exercise, even if nothing happens,
Yes,
because a lot
100,
of these guys don't,
100%.
because it's like, oh, I'm not going to do that because guess what? I know I'm not going to be good at it, so it's only going to hurt me. Which
And
whatever.
actually more importantly than like we're still going to hear what teams think about these two
Yeah.
guys' abilities to do those things coming out of it. Um, at the end of the day, as it relates to the draft on the two of them, I think it's just going to end. I do wonder if Falk is going to be hurt by Sanders and Williams from last year. Just obvious or not Sanders, Stewart, sorry.
Stewart. Yeah.
Um, obviously Stewart was its own situation I think people can write off. And Michael Williams, like I think was for the most part until the injury kind of what he was billed as, but I think teams still might be scared away by the backlash of how that didn't work out. The big, strong, tough guy just oh yeah, don't worry, it'll just work itself out. And then it so clearly didn't, at least in year one for those guys.
Yeah.
I think it'll ultimately just come down to teams in the middle of the first round to the end of the first round who's looking for a 4-3 end and who's looking for a 3-4 outside linebacker.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
and it's going to be your a flavor kind of thing
Yes.
for
Yep.
where they get picked. Um, but yeah, seeing monitoring how people are feeling about those guys coming out of the combine, one way or another, even if it's just hey, in the meetings, we were asking Howell about his hand rush or pass rush moves and his hand usage, and this is what he told us, and we really liked it. Or, oh,
Yeah.
we asked Falk, we showed him clips of his pass rush and asked him to explain his pass rush moves, and he or plan, and he couldn't think of one. Oops, that didn't go
Yeah.
well. Um, More
Granted,
and more, it's
granted,
becoming these thought exercises rather than us getting to watch him run around.
granted, some of that can be passed off if they like are coached up to interview very well. It's like it's like how
Yeah,
get go into an interview for a job you're definitely not qualified for. It's like, oh, I see that you put like uh AI, expertise in your resume. It's like, yeah, I can do that. It's like
I
uses
can
Chat
Google.
GPT once,
Yeah.
right? It's like, yeah, definitely don't know how to do that,
I
but I'll
asked
put it on a
AI what I
resume.
should put on my resume, and they said I should say I'm good at AI.
Yeah.
Um, all right, let's get here. Let's do a guy who also has a new job this year, and this is my "It's a Small World After All" award, and it's going to the New York Giants and how they're going to end up building out their team. As we all know, ex-Ravens head coach John Harbaugh is now the head coach of the Giants, and I'm not sure if you know this, but the Giants haven't been very good for like a pretty long time. So I'm interested in how Harbaugh, this ultra competitive guy who's had a lot of winning football seasons, is going to jumpstart the roster. Well, remember when Tyler Linderbaum didn't get an extension in Baltimore after year three? And then remember when they declined his fifth year option? They said, it's nothing to worry about. Don't look over here. The number on a fifth year option for a center is way too high for what the market is for center. We'll get it done. Don't worry about it. Well, now the whole coaching staff in Baltimore is new, and Linderbaum is about to be a very expensive free agent. And the Giants need a center. So not only is Linderbaum a free agent, but so is Isaiah Likely, Daniel Faalele, Kyle Van Noy, Keaton Mitchell. I threw that in for you. Charlie Kolar, Brent Urban, Patrick Ricard, Ardarius Washington, and Alohi Gilman. And also, Marlon Humphrey is a potential cap casualty for Baltimore.
Mm.
So this could be a huge play by Harbaugh and the Giants. We always see coaches bring a couple players to their new team to be kind of culture setters and help with like install and explanation to the new players. Hey, this is how we used to do it. This is how they coach it. Let me help you out, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of times it's like a couple role players. It's like, yeah, the third edge rusher or whatever, like a role playing wide receiver. But not only could the Giants have a lot of role players, I listed a bunch of names. A lot of those guys are role players, but there are also some pretty big names that could provide a real talent upgrade at key positions as well. So I guess, and we don't have to go through all of these names, but like, how aggressive do you think you'd like to see the Giants be in acquiring some of these Ravens players? And then on the other end, like, how much should the Ravens try to hold on to some of these players for this new coaching regime, do you think?
I mean, I think that Linderbaum, if I'm the Ravens, like I first off, I can't really believe that they like haven't extended him. I think that that's pretty bold for a guy like, yeah, sure. Does he have his limitations? Yes, but I mean, he is such a like just solid. Even if he's not going to be elite of elite at his position, like he's gonna be borderline top 10 for a long time, and just I know that there was some dysfunction offensively, like at times throughout the last two seasons, but I mean, I don't think that. I sure in some ways you might be able to attribute it to like the offensive line struggles, but ultimately, outside of I guess I would say like injury, I mean, like this past season the offensive line was worse than the previous, but I don't think that Linderbaum is the one that's kind of should be pinned as like the scapegoat for that. I think he's actually one of the foundational pieces of it. So if they choose to let him walk, I'll be pretty shocked. And if they do, then yes, of course, like that's a priority ad if you're the Giants. Just given that, well, now I'm forgetting the dude's name. The guy they drafted a couple years ago from
John
Minnesota.
Michael
Like,
Schmitz,
yeah, Michael
Minnesota.
Schmitz. Thank you. Has not worked out like at all. Not very good in the NFL. And so it's definitely a position of need. For some of the other guys you named, like I don't think they bring back Kyle Van Noy. I think that's like I don't know how much more he even has in the tank. Like what is he like year 11?
God, yeah, at least.
Yeah, so like I don't know how much more he has in the tank. I would say that like I think Alohi Gilman probably gets re-signed. Honestly, only because of the Minter uh,
Oh
connection.
yeah, great point.
Um,
Yeah,
given
it's
that he
funny
was
that he's going. Yeah, he gets traded from the Chargers to the
to
Ravens,
the
and then
Ravens,
the
and
guy
then his
that's
old
coming in is going to be the
DC
Chargers. Yeah,
comes in
that's
and is
great.
like,
Great
"Hey,
call.
remember me?"
Yep.
But I think that outside of that, I think that there is a likelihood that Harbaugh, like, because Harbaugh definitely has an affinity for a couple of these guys. Like, it would be surprising if he didn't bring in Keaton Mitchell, um, if not only for returning,
hmm
just because I like he's a special teams guy at heart, and B, like Keaton was very effective in that role, and as long as he stays healthy, he'll probably be signed. Can you go through the names again, the
Yeah,
ones that we
yeah.
haven't talked about? Because I
So Faalele, who was
okay,
not
yeah,
good for Baltimore last
yeah,
year,
bad,
but
bad.
Greg Van Roten's a free agent.
Okay,
But they probably just try to bring back Van Roten, I assume. Uh, Kyle Van Noy, Keaton Mitchell, Charlie Kolar. I think the Giants have
Kolar,
multiple
okay.
tight ends that are free
Oh,
agents. I'm working back up
likely
to
was
the
the big
big one.
one.
I'm working back up to the big one. Brent Urban's 35. He's been in the league forever. This would be a
Yeah,
classic, like he might just show up for training camp kind of deal,
and
just to
then
hang
real
out and collect one more
retires.
paycheck and then retire slash his cut. Patrick Ricard, I threw on there for fun.
Okay, yes, that's what it
Uh,
was. Yeah,
and then if Gilman were to stay, I figure one of our Darius Washington and Alohi Gilman, one will go to New York, one will go to Baltimore. I'm sure of
yeah.
it.
I
So our
I
Darius
think that
Washington going
sounds
to New
right.
York would be fun. But yes, the other big one is Isaiah Likely.
Yeah, which I think that with them extending Mark Andrews, it seems like writing's on the wall. They're not going to pay two tight ends. So
Yes.
likely is going to be probably outside of David Njoku, like the best tight end on the market, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, depending on like what you're going for. If you're going for like a youth, like more youth, you're
Yeah.
gonna go
Yeah.
towards likely. Like Njoku's probably, I mean, he's a lot younger than maybe people realize, but um,
A lot of football.
yeah. But as far as likely goes, I do think that there's a likelihood that he does get signed to the Giants only because of watching them last year and them going through this Theo Johnson experiment. It just did not work. Like that dude is
Mm-hmm.
not,
Mm-hmm.
he cannot play starting tight end right now. He can't catch passes to save his life. Like he's all the athletic traits in the world, doesn't know how to play the position. And that's all it is. And I think that in a way, like you kind of get some of that with Isaiah Likely, but he definitely knows how to play the position more.
Oh yeah.
Just from a like soundness of as a pass catcher. I mean, I think that especially given the limited amount of pass catching options currently on the Giants, like I think you kind of need that, especially in the middle of the field. I think that um, given that Neighbors is going to be coming back from an injury, I think that the two guys of all those you named, which I know this is like, okay, duh, but like the two best players, I think, of what you named are Likely and Linderbaum, and I think those are the two guys that they should make priority ads. But I think that Likely's market is probably going to be pretty hefty. I think,
Mm-hmm.
especially the other thing to consider is that like as we move into a two tight end,
Mm-hmm.
um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like market
Yep.
almost, where it's like every team just wants to have two really good tight ends now.
Yeah. Yep.
It's not just the Ravens who started doing it. It's like now you have the Rams, you have the Seahawks, you have all these teams that they want two of these guys and they
Yep.
want them to be different prototypes so that they can kind of like have these heavy formations and be able to like utilize the run game to the fullest potential, but B, like have versatile pass catchers that create mismatches. And Isaiah Likely is the kind of guy who's a mismatch for a lot of teams. And so I think that if the Giants are to sign, I think it's going to be more difficult. I guess all this to say, I think it's going to be more difficult for them to sign Likely than it is Linderbaum.
Yeah.
Linderbaum, I think it's clear that the organization didn't really prioritize him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, whether it's positional value or whatever, doesn't matter. Um, whereas Likely, I think it's like they kind of felt like they were pigeonholed into a corner of like man, we can really only pick one of these guys. And
Hmm.
it's like,
Hmm.
do you pick the young guy who may or may not be as good as Mark Andrews is or was, but we have him for longer, or do you say, look, let's just give Mark Andrews one more contract? He's still an elite player, or a very good player at the very least, and we'll figure it out after the fact. And it's clear which route they took, and then now, like I said, I do think that the market for Isaiah Likely is going to be much more bustling than it is for Linderbaum.
And center is interesting because teams are showing that if you build, well, if I can O-line nerd for a second, if you build the rest of your O-line pretty well, center, I like, which is not what I would expect, but center you can kind of flub because those
Yeah,
guys are insulated in so many ways. Like the main job is like good snaps and good communication. Obviously, you need your interior to be strong, just like the defensive tackle versus edge conversation we had earlier tonight. Like people are learning, like it's not just about having elite tackles. Your interior needs to be strong. But if you have two strong guards, then like yeah, your center you can give up a little there. So like the Broncos taking Wattenberg to the AFC title game, and I made fun of the Bears and Drew Dahlman,
yeah.
um the Seahawks, whoever's there, I
I
forget
don't
their
even
center's
remember who
name
the
all the time.
center is.
Patriots too, like and so we can get
Yeah,
away
the
with it.
Patriots took Bradbury. Yeah,
Meanwhile, Linderbaum is going to be looking to like reset the center market probably. Creed Humphrey got his deal a couple of years ago. At this point, the center that got signed, oh, Cam Jurgens got paid after Creed, but got a million less. Creed got 18, Jurgens got 17, but that's been a couple of years since Creed. So Linderbaum's going to look to reset the market. He's going to look for 1920. How many teams are going to do that? The other thing we can't know for sure is do either of these guys or any of these role players even not want to play for Harbaugh, right? Do any of them feel a little spurned by Harbaugh or offensive assistant coach Greg Roman? Like how,
right.
because Roman's on the Giants staff. Like, is Linderbaum or likely are they excited to play for Greg Roman? I don't know. I don't know. I don't have anything that tells me that they wouldn't, other than Roman got fired for a reason. But so we don't know if they'd actually be interested in any of this. But it would be really cool if literally all these guys that I listed just like went to New York and then
Yeah,
just it was just Baltimore North and we see what happens. Um, but I do think the Giants should be aggressive. I do think it's a situation where they should be willing to overpay for a couple of these guys,
yeah,
and they shouldn't be worried about the fact that let's say Kyle Van Noy, let's say he called Harbaugh and was like, "Hey man, look, I want to end my career with you. I don't really care what the role is.
yeah.
I'd be okay. I have Thibodeau, I have Burns, I have who was the draft pick last year, Carter,
Abdul Carter.
but I'll overpay for Kyle Van Noy to be a 35-year-old edge forward just so he could be in the room with these guys and
Yeah.
bring over a little badassness kind of deal."
And
Um,
one more thing to like you making a point for like them to be aggressive, and to the point of Linderbaum, like the value that he would serve on that Giants team is Linderbaum isn't totally absolved from like being partially responsible for the development of Lamar Jackson as a passer
mhm.
over the last few seasons, and I wonder
Yep.
if maybe if that is it comes out that Linderbaum is a priority signing for them, that if they just kind of see him as a key in Dart's development as a quarterback, as a passer. So I do think that like I do think that there is grounds to, not just because it's a position of need, but just because it's a position that's going to elevate the asset that they have, that they've committed to at quarterback, and just doing everything you can to you know expedite his development. And I
Yes.
think that doing that is kind of one of the things you can do to accomplish that.
Think of Rodney Hudson going to the Cardinals in year two of Kyler Murray at center. Think of Corey Linsley going to Justin Herbert in
Yeah.
year two of the with the Chargers. Um, yeah, teams like to do this. I would pay Linderbaum to be the highest paid center in the NFL to go snap for jar. One word answer, and then we're moving on. Wandale Robinson is also a free agent. If you're the Giants, would you rather pay for Likely or Robinson if you could only get one? One word answer. Pick one.
Likely.
I think that's the correct answer. All right. Peyton, what's your final award?
My final award is the Evil Kermit Award. And this goes to A.J. Brown and the Philadelphia Eagles managing of A.J. Brown and the way that I think that during the combine, there's probably going to be a lot of talk of, hey, it seems like you guys are not doing too well. A.J. Brown seems like he might want to go play somewhere else, maybe even for our team. So, I'm speaking as anonymous other party team. Um, the evil Kermit part of this is kind of the 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 ideology of like the devil and the angel on their shoulder, because that's basically what the meme is like the same paradox of the Eagles themselves, and like the good Kermit is AJ Brown's a really good wide receiver and makes our team a lot better. We should keep that guy. And evil Kermit is this dude is a cancer. Let's get him off our team and therefore make our team significantly worse. And I guess it's just I don't want to dumb down AJ Brown trade ideas to that, but ultimately it's if you're the Eagles, I don't necessarily understand other than I guess like maybe the chemistry part of it. Like what exactly from a football standpoint makes any sense to trade AJ Brown? And I say that
Um,
rhetorically because clearly you kind of like agree with the idea that like AJ Brown makes the Eagles significantly better. They literally won a championship partially because they traded for him and got to this point and developed Jalen Hurts as a passer with the help of him on the team. And Jalen Hurts wasn't as good of a passer until AJ Brown came along. So what's the logic for
the
for
the
trading
one
him?
the one argument I can see, and I don't even know what his contract is. I don't know if they're gonna have to give him an
Um,
extension soon or
I
not.
mean it's I have some information on. He signed through 2029. He can
Okay, well
seek a
there you're done. You're done. You're done. You know, because it would be one thing if like, oh, approaching 30, like I need an extension soon, but you've already done that. And the Eagles always do their crazy cap things with their contracts now. Um, the one thing that Eagles fans might be screaming at us saying is how he gave up last year, right? So not just getting mad on the sidelines and arguing with the coach and whatever he says in the media, but like he gave up during games last year. And I would, to your point accurately, I would say that that's not a football talent issue. That's a coaching and culture issue.
correct.
And I do think Howie Roseman is smart enough to to and he's shown this, blame the coaches before he blames the players. So I think, yeah. But if you want to flip this a little bit, could this be AJ Brown with doing the evil Kermit or the good Kermit about forcing his way out? Maybe.
Correct. Like it's like in the same way it's AJ Brown, good Kermit. I we won a Super Bowl. I'm on a pretty good team. Like I might have
You
my differences.
OC. Let's see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah. Evil Kermit is no, you're a wide receiver. Like you like because the whole thing with there was the whole thing with him after he won the Super Bowl. Like he wasn't really happy, I guess. Like he wasn't as happy as he thought he would be. So it's
Mhm.
like, Evil Kermit is like winning doesn't give you the satisfaction. The satisfaction comes from personal success. And so it's like so in regards to like him forcing himself out, like yeah, there is that element to it as well um that comes into play. And I think that like ultimately this is a way for us to kind of like now talk about think about like what an AJ Brown trade even is at this point, right?
Mhm.
He's 29 years old, approaching 30. I think his cap hits like 23.4 million for this year, um, which is pretty hefty for a wide receiver. And the other trades for like wide receivers in this range, around this, like around this age that happened somewhat recently. Like last 2 seasons, we had like Stephon Diggs, which I guess that's probably the best comparison of like a
Mhm.
receiver who's not like the elite of elite, but like kind of that next tier down. Um, he was age 31, got traded from Buffalo to Houston. It was a second round pick for Stephon Diggs, a sixth round pick, and the fifth round pick. Um, Amari Cooper, which I okay, he wasn't as good as we thought he was going to be, but at the time he was still really good. He got traded for basically a third. It was essentially a third round pick. For
Hmm.
like, there was a couple other picks involved, but
Was
that's
that the
and then
Dallas to Cleveland trade?
no, that's the Cleveland to Buffalo trade. Um,
Oh dear God.
yeah, that happened. That like
Buffalo. I
yeah,
can't believe
which
Brandon Bean is still the GM of the Bills, man.
that's a topic for another day because I
Okay,
also
yeah,
can't
you're
believe
right.
that.
Move on. Move on.
And then DK Metcalf, last season, age 28 season, same draft class. Seahawks get second and a seventh. Steelers get DK Metcalf and a sixth. So
Mhm.
um, the pick like valuation, I would probably say it's hovering around like a second round pick. Essentially, is what it's
Yes.
going to cost you
Hmm.
to get AJ Brown. Just that those were just the examples that like kind of help us value like what is AJ Brown worth at this point. Um, the really obvious one is just like people want to put AJ Brown on the Bills so bad, and I get it. It's just because the Bills like everybody wants to see the Bills get some kind of number one receiver. Like I think it makes
Hmm.
a lot of sense. Um, I don't know that they would. I really don't think Brandon Bean does that personally. Because if they aren't keeping a 30-year-old Stephon Diggs,
Hmm.
who's pretty much like the same. I don't want to say the same. Definitely a different kind of receiver, but like same age group, like same kind of like expectation of like the amount, like contract.
Hmm.
If they pass on that guy, like what makes you think that the same GM with the similar like roster is going to want to bring in AJ Brown? Like that's the thing that doesn't make sense to me from like when you're looking at it from the same guy who built the team passed on the opportunity to do this once and they didn't really seem to like regret it, so to speak, I guess. Um,
That argument assumes that Brandon Bean is of sound mind, but
right.
I would say if I'm going to present the argument to that, I think it was that the Diggs relationship has soured and it was gone.
Yeah, and that,
And
that that's
while the
part of it
AJ
too.
Brown relationship has proven it will probably end up there eventually, if you can get a 2 year window where he's happy and he's with Josh Allen and you're trying to win a Super Bowl right now, um, yeah, I could do it. Now, will Bean admit he was wrong and go out and spend big on a wide receiver after claiming that their wide receivers were great? I don't know. We'll see.
Right.
Um, he'll- he and Pagula will get back up there and be like, I tried to trade for AJ Brown before, and Sean McDermott kept saying no, so I just didn't get
Right.
to do it. But
So I just
uh,
drafted Keon instead.
yeah. Anyways, all right. Enough Brandon Bean slander for me.
um,
What's another one?
yeah, I like just destination wise. I'm not gonna go through like what the compensation is, but like the other teams that come to mind are which there's one that I think is being slept on a lot, which is the team that as soon as I saw the Eagles lose, I was like, all right, AJ Brown's gonna figure out how to get the hell out of town. But Patriots, Chargers, Broncos, Ravens are like the other four that a lot of people I've seen like name that are target like that are destinations that people
Hmm.
see like making sense and like that have draft pick compensation that they can give for it, the cap room, all that kind of stuff. Um, I guess I'll ask you like, what is the most appealing to you of those four, just from a sense of like whether you are AJ Brown or just from a sense of team building? Like, what do you think he thrives in
You're not
of
gonna let
those
me say
four?
Steelers. That's unfortunate for me. Um, let's see. You said Ravens.
Ravens,
Ravens,
Broncos,
Patriots,
Chargers, Patriots.
Broncos, Chargers. I mean, I think Patriots have to kind of be the
Yeah.
automatic. That would be
Okay.
great.
I agree. I
Um,
agree. Okay. The
Chargers, it feels like it would go horribly wrong.
the Chargers was the weird one to me because I don't really feel like they need that. I feel like
Like in
they
in theory, just like Justin Herbert and AJ Brown would be sick. That would be so cool.
sure.
But it just feels like it'd be so doomed that I don't even want it to happen. Did you say the Broncos?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I don't need Bo Nix with AJ Brown. That sounds horrible.
Yeah.
Um, Baltimore is the new Tennessee. Let's not put 30-year-old good wide
Yeah.
receivers in there anymore. Um, and then yeah, so I think Patriots, Drake May with AJ Brown. So
Now,
and
now,
and Mike Vrabel and Mike Vrabel. I'm sure you're
yes,
gonna get
and
to
Mike
that.
Vrabel, which that's kind of like the other big thing is
Yeah, that'd be
like with
sick.
the Patriots is like the clearly Vrabel loved that guy. Like
Yeah,
that was a Vrabel guy to the core.
yeah.
Like they
It was the
clearly
beginning
had
of the end
chemistry
when they
there.
traded him. Hmm.
Yeah. I think that's the most intriguing in my opinion of places.
Yep.
That is like the place that makes the most sense.
Is
Um,
Stephon Diggs still under contract too? Would they have Diggs
I
there
believe so.
after we?
Yes. So I think they would have both of them,
Oh yeah,
which would be
Alpha
really
Diva
cool.
receivers.
Yeah.
Let's do this. New
Now,
England fans would love that, I'm sure.
there's one destination, and I feel like we're just going to talk about this team a lot today, which makes sense because it's the combine. Um, the team that I predicted that he would end up being on when they lost that playoff game, I immediately was like, oh, okay, just trade him to the Raiders. Like like they have no other than Brock Bowers, like no other wide receiver of consequence, I guess, unless you really like Trey Tucker, and he's gonna get a ton of targets because
Mm,
Mendoza's just gonna have to develop. He's gonna get tons of like individual accolades and like not necessarily accolades, individual stats at the very least. Like he's gonna be like getting the ball all the time, and that's all. It seems like that's very important to him. I guess is all
mm.
I'm saying, and it seems like something, even if it's not like the best option, as far as like surrounding Mendoza with competent pass catching or even good pass catching options, it's definitely on the table like for what they could do. Like, do you want to spend a second round pick on, I guess you could spend it on one of his teammates like Omar Cooper or, Elijah Surratt, but
Hmm.
do you want to spend a second round pick on a like questionable wide receiver that has like some potential, or do you want to like send the second round pick away and get AJ Brown for a couple seasons so you can develop Fernando Mendoza?
Similar to teams like the Ravens and the Titans and who else did I say? And the Chargers. There's just not a world where AJ Brown going to Vegas ends well for anybody. Not a good track record for wide receivers going to at points of their careers. So I'm gonna veto that one.
Okay,
Can I give you a new one?
sure.
We've been staying in the AFC. Let me move over to the NFC. The 49ers.
I thought about it, but I wonder if they kind of, part of me wonders if they just don't want to build a wide receiver core around a guy who makes like that kind of contract after how the AU thing went.
Right, but the fact that they gave Ayuk the money signals that like they would do it.
Yeah, I guess it's just like, do they have PTSD from it? And like, do they just want
That's
to say, you know what,
that's
we're
true.
just gonna, draft another one of these guys and
Yep.
build with, re-sign Jawan, and then it's, I like the idea, but I don't know if they actually
Wait,
do it.
Saints.
Saints makes a lot more sense,
Kellen
I
Moore.
think. Yeah,
Kellen Moore.
Saints makes a ton of sense.
They were together. Need
Yep,
another receiver.
yep.
Um, Detroit probably not.
You're probably getting a lot of cap space back finally if you're the
Yep.
Saints, like finally after all those years. So I think that
Yeah, I
that
figure
one
they'll
makes
just
sense.
launder enough money to make it work. They'll sell the
Yeah.
Pelicans in some backroom deal or something. Um, we haven't mentioned the Chiefs, which for a very long time was the insert wide receiver here. Have we given up on that idea that the Chiefs are a wide receiver away? Or are you assuming they get Tyreek Hill in a day or two?
I mean, partially, yes, but I also just think that like they've allocated. I feel like they drafted a first. They spent like
They've done
they've spent enough draft capital on wide receiver at this point. Like I just
makes
don't know
sense.
that they're gonna overload and spend even more draft capital, even if it's not like through the draft. If they're spending a pick to get a guy,
Right.
I don't know that that's. I don't think that's necessarily in the cards for them.
Let's just send him to the Steelers, get it over with, reunite him and DK, and we'll be good to go.
But all that to be said, I guess like ultimately, this I guess this is the way of like kind of tying a bow on this conversation, like with a one word answer. Do you think he gets traded?
Do I think he does get traded? No.
I think he doesn't either. Ultimately,
Had everything else stayed the same, I think he does get traded. But I think enough things are changing between the coaches and the other players that might potentially leave that they try everything to make it work.
I
Hey,
think so
new
too.
offense. Hey, we're gonna do this sort of thing with Hurts, and he's gonna be able to throw these things. Here's the OC with the new playbook. Doesn't mean trade deadline if things don't aren't going well, he doesn't get traded then. But
Yeah,
no,
yeah. I guess
I
I meant
think
more so like around
yeah,
draft
nope.
time, post draft.
I
Yeah.
think he's in Philly late in the summer.
Okay.
But Patriots would be my favorite team of the teams you mentioned, probably all the teams that we talked about.
Likewise.
All right, we have one more trade candidate to talk about tonight. So this is where we'll round things out. We've talked about this team a lot. It's the Las Vegas Raiders. It's the Rock and Roller Coaster Award because it has been very rocky and very roller coastery for Max Crosby in his time with the Las Vegas Raiders. Um, he has once again asking for a trade. Some of you have heard this before. Crosby is about to be on his sixth head coach in 8 NFL seasons, all with the Raiders. And in that time, he's only had one winning season. Vegas, however, wants to hold on to Crosby. New head coach Clint Kubiak made that known during his opening press conference, and they even retained and promoted Crosby's defensive line coach Rob Leonard to be their DC. So the question is, should the Raiders trade Crosby? And if they did, where could he go? And what could they get for him? So if I'm hang on, before I give you my answer, let me go through because I also did the thing where I looked at trades that were similar. Um, and here is the history of that. So Khalil Mack, when he got traded to the Chargers, so this is going back to 2022. I believe Mack to the Chargers was the oldest trade I had in 2022. And the Bears got a second and a sixth. Bradley Chubb going to the Dolphins was a first and a fourth. Montez Sweat to the Bears was a second. Brian Burns to the Giants was a second and a fifth. And then Micah Parsons, obviously, to the Packers was two firsts and a player. I'd expect Crosby to bring in a one. You know, Khalil Mack
Yeah.
was older than Crosby when he got that 2 and 6. Um, Crosby is clearly a better player than Sweat and Burns. The Chubb trade was probably an overpay. But the two ones and a player for Parsons, I think you could justify getting a one for Crosby, and maybe you can get something else. And especially if you give up something else, like I don't know what it'd be, but like if you gave up a fourth, maybe you could also get a third or something along those lines. But I think you should be able to get a first for Max Crosby, and that's the starting point. I think if you're Vegas. Um, so just simply, what are you doing? What are you trading Crosby? Are you willing to trade Crosby if you get a first round pick this year? Let's say it's in the back half of the draft. Would you trade Crosby this year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that it's just more to me, and I think that like based on seeing what like the trades that you named off of it, like I think that given that I mean I know Micah Parsons that's like not even close to the same stratosphere of trade, but like I do think that Crosby. I don't know that you necessarily have to give up a pick in order to get a second pick back. Not a
Hmm.
first by any means, but like I think you could get like a third from somebody.
A first and a third just for
You,
Crosby.
yeah, or and even if it's not in this year's draft, I think you could get a third like in next year's draft.
Hmm.
Just the thing is, the roster needs so much help
Yeah.
and injection of youth that while yes, Max is a foundational type of player for this roster, he is not the type of player that you need to build a foundation. I know that sounds like very like fake sage and wise, but it's really the truth. Like in that ultimately you're starting from square zero. If you have Max Crosby on your team, you're basically wasting value for a guy who's probably going to leave anyways in free agency by the end of the contract. So to then kind of flip him into a like the like somewhere probably a team somewhere in the I would say 20 to like 28 range is probably where I would say they could probably get a pick from. Um, Trying to think of like the teams that are there, like who could do
I
that.
I can help you with that. Would you like to hear what I have
Sure.
for you? So the only team that I think I've written down, there are three teams that I have written down that should be interested. That it's probably too their pick is too early to do it, but you could still probably consider it. Would be the Bengals, the Commanders, and the Titans. All have all have top 10 picks. You could do it. Maybe those are the teams that are like, we'll give you our first, but you give us your second sort of deal, and plus Max Crosby. Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe they all would do it. But here are the teams more in the later part of the draft that I wrote down. The Bears, the Lions,
Okay.
the Panthers, the Eagles, the Ravens, the Bucks, and the Patriots. Ooh, and the 49ers.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Most of those make sense to me.
So that's a lot of teams. That's
Yeah.
12 teams altogether, even with those three picks in the top 10. So we're talking about a third of the league, though, should be like, yeah, here's our first round pick for Max Crosby. Do you have a favorite team that I mentioned?
I mean, I think just from a sense of the nightmare it would create for the team, probably Detroit. Like I mean, just from a sense of
Yeah.
if you're gonna create some kind of trump card on your defense for a defense that's been exciting at times, but then again frustrating due to whether it's health or like unreliable coverage issues. Um, Basically having two of what the best six, eight edge
Hmm.
rushers on the same
Hmm.
team, both in I would say like both in their what their primes are considered. I mean, because Aiden's pretty much already reaching kind of like what the peak of what we think he is. Um, I think that's probably the most appealing. Other than that, I would probably say the issue with a like team like the 49ers is that I understand that it makes sense to have, you know, I guess Nick Bosa coming back from injury and Max Crosby to kind of like one last hurrah this thing because
Hmm.
I don't really know if their window is going to be anything past this year, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think those are probably the two that make the most sense after thinking about it. Like I would kind of hate it if the Panthers did this, honestly. I don't, no offense to them, but I think that would be it would definitely be like not to talk about a different sport, but it would feel much like the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade for Utah, where it's like, okay, you started your rebuild and then you got like halfway there, and then you decided to spend your assets on that. Where it's like that's the big move. No, like no offense to Max Crosby, but like you're not going from being a pretty like feisty, you know, barely got in the playoffs division winner um, to all of a sudden being like a contender for the NFC by adding Max Crosby. Sorry, not sorry. Like it's just not you're not getting there by that.
It's the same situation as the Raiders, where the defense just isn't good enough around them necessarily. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, like the Eagles and Ravens would be like popular ones, right? Because
yeah,
of just history of those teams just kind of adding this kind of player and being like, of course they did.
right.
Um, the Ravens think you haven't had that kind of edge rusher in a long
Not in a
time. There's,
while, man.
whether it was last year or the year before, Kyle Van Noy had the big season, but that wasn't. He's an all pro edge rusher. That was just kind of like a
Yeah.
nice season. It's funny. Did I think we just traded the Patriots' first two picks in the draft and got the Max Crosby and AJ Brown. Um, Talk about coming off of losing the Super Bowl.
Right.
But the Lions is like the hand in glove fit. It's like the match that we've been waiting for a few years now. So I
Yeah.
definitely get that one. Um, I don't even think I have a favorite one necessarily, but that one is just healing for the heart. Now, if I'm the Raiders, though, while I see the benefit, and I would do it, and it's funny, I was just like, I would trade the Mendoza pick, but now I'm saying I would keep Max Crosby, right?
Okay.
Because if the Commanders, Patriots, and Bears have taught us anything in the last couple seasons, it's that a team can turn things around quick if they have the right QB, head call, or head coach or play caller combination. It's something Ben and I talked about in our Super Bowl preview just a couple weeks ago with that kind of combination. So if I'm Kubiak and the Raiders and I'm going to draft Mendoza number one overall, I'm looking at Mendoza, Genty, Bowers, and maybe spending money on a receiver in free agency or sending my second round draft pick for AJ Brown, like you mentioned. Um, I want a defense built around Crosby because even though the rest of the defense might not be elite, we just saw the Patriots cobble it enough, cobble it together enough defensively without a Max Crosby-esque player. I think the Raiders can, depending on what they do with their picks in the draft, over the next year or two, invest enough on the defensive side of the ball. And I mean, what's their cap situation right now? I don't remember off the top of my head, but like they might be able to supercharge this defense pretty quick, similar to what the Patriots did, where they just paid for a bunch of veteran. I mean, the Raiders have the second most cap space right now. Effective cap space is $91.5 million.
Okay, that's pretty
And
good.
it's not a great free agent. It's pretty good. It's not a great free agency class, but if you just like the Patriots did, just slightly overspend on good quality players, and Mendoza is a hit and Kubiak's a hit, and you get a receiver to complement Bowers. This thing could get supercharged pretty quick here. And again, like the Raiders, AFC is so much harder than the AFC to do this, but we've seen several of these teams kind of supercharge over a year or two and get far in the playoffs. So I think I'm trying to keep Crosby. Now, if I do what I said at the beginning of the pod, I trade the number one over Brick, then yeah, I trade Crosby. I do the whole thing. But um, I wouldn't, I certainly wouldn't do it for less than a one, and I would angle for more than that. But I think I'd keep Crosby at the end of the day.
Interesting. So, like, let me ask you, because just last thing regarding this, because likely the pick you would be getting, like the compensation you'd be getting, would be that like late ish first round pick from this
Hmm.
year, and then whatever other pick. I'm not going to focus on that.
Yeah.
Do you think it's better team building practice to, I guess, if you don't have the faith as a a the guy building the team, that it's going to be a quick turnaround and Crosby's going to be able to lead like a league average defense. Um, is it not better to just take the win in getting that pick and then using it on, probably, I would say, likely a really good guard to
Okay.
just help the offensive line, help the run game with JT?
Ione. So you're getting
Yeah,
Ione out of Penn
sure.
State. Okay.
Yeah. Is that not a better way for team building
Hmm.
than keeping Max Crosby? It's really hard to like say yes and
Uh-huh.
no, because like obviously it's all theory, but it's a
Right.
matter of like, do you sacrifice the defensive stability and like defensive, um I guess, like, I would just say like any presence of like a respectable defense for
Hmm.
the sake of developing a franchise quarterback? Or do you put the franchise quarterback in not as ideal of a situation, but you're at least like more competitive overall as a team, I guess?
I think if I'm Clint Kubiak I mean, it's a great point. I think if I'm Clint Kubiak in the Raiders, it would be pretty easy to point to last year's coaching staff just completely mishandling the offensive line and just banking on what Kubiak did with the. I think it's underrated how good the tackles are in Seattle. Charles
Yeah,
Cross is a legitimate top 10 left tackle. Abraham Lucas, he's just been hurt his whole career, but remember his rookie year, he was
very good
awesome.
when he's
And
not hurt.
he was good this year and he was healthy. They get Gray Zabel in the first round. So to your point, like you're kind of you could mimic the thing of having Gray Zabel. Um, but I would say with all that cap space, and I know it's not like good free agent offensive linemen are hardly ever in free agency, but like uh, Wyatt Teller, Joel Bitonio, um, Isaac Seumalo, all guys that still can play good ball. I mean, John Simpson was just good for the Jets recently. Um, Elijah Vera Tucker is a free agent. I imagine the Jets are only going to keep one of those two guards.
Yeah,
There are there are guys out there that have played good ball. Now you know the way to my heart, and if I can get Vega Ione out of Penn State, that sounds pretty sick. But you do that, and let's say the offense takes off a little bit, and then but you get to the end of the year and you have the worst defense.
yeah.
How
That's kind of where the
long?
dichotomy of it is. Is like,
But to your point, you could still do the Patriots and without a top guy, try to supercharge that defense. I mean, we'd have to really go through and look at like all the defensive free agents and like how much
sure,
can you really build it out. Um, it is probably the smarter team building thing, but I do think the hardest thing to do in the NFL is get one of these premier game-changing defensive players. And while Crosby is a step down from Garrett and
Parsons.
Hutchinson and Parsons, maybe not even Hutchinson, he might be on the same level as Hutchinson. He just does so much from a run defense, pressures, culture. like all of that stuff. You're talking me out of it. I think you might be winning. Because the one thing I was going to say about Crosby in this whole conversation about him is he's had one season where he had more than 12 sacks. He had 14 and a half sacks 2 years ago. He's never been the like 15, 16, 17. He's never like the best years of TJ Watt, the best years of Miles Garrett, the best years of even Trey Hendrickson. He hasn't reached that from a pass rush standpoint. So if you're not getting that, if you're just getting 12 to 14 sacks a season, it's the Khalil Mack argument, right? Um, but Khalil Mack's been traded twice. So
Yeah.
you're probably right. And Ione is the right example because in my head, what I was thinking about like you make the trade, but you take Denzel Boston because you need a receiver, right? But let's say the other three guys are gone. Okay, would you
I
rather
mean,
have Denzel Boston or
yeah.
Max Crosby? You know, like so. But Ione, you might have won the battle there. Talking about Ione, it'll
This
be
doesn't.
interesting.
I mean, it's just. It doesn't have to necessarily be Ione, but like this is a good guard class, like interior offensive line class, because some of
Hmm.
these guys that that in theory might be tackles might even just be guards, and
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
like it's and the only reason I brought it up is honestly because of it being Kubiak coming over and
Yeah.
having like okay, we took we took a guy who was very clearly like if not the best guard, one of the best guards in the draft last year. And we saw what it did for our offensive line and our run game and the development of a quarterback who before was not fully like a fully fleshed out
Hmm.
quarterback. And so there's signs that it might be better to do that than just having Max be a stable force on the defense whenever you're not really doing anything from a competitive standpoint.
But Kubiak also saw what really good defensive line play is.
Yeah, there's also that point too.
And the difference is, Seattle had a bunch of B's and B pluses, like a bunch
Yeah,
of them, like eight or
yeah,
nine of them. And Crosby is one A guy,
yeah,
and there's not a lot outside of that. But like, you got to start somewhere. So
yeah.
I think I would still kind of bet on Kubiak, looking at his offensive line and saying, can I get one more year out of? I forget. Parham might be a free agent. Parham has played good ball in his career, but let me turn around Jackson Powers Johnson because those guys
Yeah.
screwed him up last year. Um, Colton Miller, can I get another year out of him? Um, can I go? But let's send Linderbaum somewhere else. How many guys can we double or triple up on where we're
Yeah.
sending them in this offseason? Um, can I get one of the guys from the Browns? Can I
Right.
draft a guy in the second round? And then I keep Crosby. I've got a workable offensive line for a year, and then I can continue to invest moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a fascinating conversation. It's one we could have till the end of time, but we are going to end it there for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all so much for watching. Peyton, thank you for being on as always. Make sure you guys are checking out Peyton on Two Peas on a Pod. That's moving every other week. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Moving
Okay.
every other week. I think up until like I think we're gonna do two back-to-back weeks for the draft, and then back to every other week, and then when the World Cup comes around, which is in like a few months, we'll be probably every week at that point.
Okay. So make sure you're following along on Two Peas on a Pod for that. Make sure you're seeing me and Peyton, Ben, Austin, other Box Score Network hosts over on the Box Score Network YouTube channel, getting you guys ready for all things NFL draft. And make sure you stay right here as well. We're gonna have more draft and NFL content for you guys. We'll do a free agency preview in a couple weeks. Ben and I are gonna start the annual NFL Draft War Room series next week, so make sure you are on the lookout for that. Be subscribed to the pod. If you're A1 Day One on audio, we appreciate you as always. If you're seeing us on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, comment. We really, really appreciate it. And go check out the Box Score Network YouTube while you are at it. And until next time, thank you all so much. Have fun and be safe out there.